Hello, welcome back. Today I want to talk about service departments. What are they? How do you value them? Should you buy them? And what to look out for when you're buying a service department. And what I also wanted to do is I wanted to use a good example of a service department here in Collins Street in a building called Clyde House. So hopefully you'll find it very useful, a useful educational topic. 182 Collins Street, Melbourne. Designed by the famous architect Nahum Barnett, who also designed the Princess Theatre and the Melbourne Synagogue. It was constructed in 1915 and it's called Clyde House, and this is the subject matter for today. In the early 80s it was converted into 55 service departments and ground floor retail shops. So the primary method of valuation for a service department is the income approach. When you compare that to a residential apartment, the primary method of valuation for a residential apartment is the direct comparison approach, where you're simply comparing one apartment to the other in terms of sizes, location, etc. The secondary method is capitalisation, so no different to a house. So they're the two big differences between a typical residential apartment and a service department. So a service department is considered a commercial property from a bank's perspective, whereas a residential apartment is considered a residential property from a bank's perspective. In both cases, if the property is less than 40 square metres, it's considered not an acceptable residential security from a bank's perspective. So even if you have an apartment which is residential, the zoning's residential, and it's used by a tenant for short, long or medium term leasing, the bank will still not apply a market value to that property because it's not considered acceptable. But for all intents and purposes, it's a residential apartment. However, with a service department, what we're effectively buying is a lease or a cash flow. So for all intents and purposes, it's a commercial property that we're buying. There are different types of service departments throughout Melbourne, but the one I want to talk about is Clyde House. So Clyde House was a property that was built in 1915. Around the early 80s, it was converted into 55 service departments with ground floor shops, as I've stated. And what I did about 20 years ago, I bought one of the apartments on level 4, just a one-bedroom unit, around about 30 square metres. So it was a property that I didn't borrow against. The bank didn't take it as security. I simply paid cash for it and bought it outright and just started enjoying the benefits of the income stream at the time, which I think were about 6% of the purchase price. But what's happened over the years, over the last 20 years, there have been a number of different operators. And these operators, what they do is they tie up each apartment with a lease. So if you can imagine, there are 55 owners, 55 leases between the owners and the operator. What happened recently is the operator went into voluntary administration, and I had to make a decision. What do? Do we collectively get together as owners and find another operator, or what do we do? So there were 4 choices that I had at my disposal. I just want to go through each floor, and that'll give you a bit of an indication as to the value of having a serviced apartment and the upside of the alternative use. So the first option was just to take back the apartment and own it and leave it vacant. But of course, I don't have any use for it in the city. I do come into the city quite often, but I don't have any use for something just to sit there vacant and idle. So that's not an option that was important to me. The second option was to get together with all the other owners and to go through the same process again to get an operator, whatever. So, but I just feel like at this stage, it's just it'd be a very complex process to follow, and it's really, I don't really have the patience really to sit around having meetings and talking about what we're going to do and getting together with all the other owners. They all have their own ideas about, you know, what's important to them, etc. I just simply don't have the time, so that's not an option. The third option was to provide the apartment to an independent service provider. In other words, someone that manages multiple properties across the city or Docklands, but different buildings. So you might have an operator that has 30 apartments and they manage those 30 apartments for short-term stay, etc. So doing what I was doing previously, just entering into a lease or taking a share of the profits, etc. We could have a profit share, maybe 80-20 profit share. So they effectively manage the property, did all set up the website for people to rent out the room, and we simply divide the profit. So that was the other option as well. But the option that I took was the fourth option, which was to take back the property, make some changes to it, and to try and look for a longer term tenant. So that's what I've done. Now, the reason I did that is also to add value, to a market value to the building, and to improve the cash flow. So previously, the cash flow that I was getting was about $19,500 net. The net amount was about $18,000. But what I realised was that the apartment lacked a few things. Firstly, it didn't have a lot of built-in robe space, and secondly, it didn't have any laundry facilities. So whilst it was self-contained, you still needed to go off-site to get laundry. And there were a few plumbing issues. There were no stop valves, etc. So what I did is I spent a little bit of money putting in some built-in robes, and you'll see what I've done. And I've also included a reverse cycle washing machine dryer, and I've also spent some money on plumbing, put in some stop valves as well. Last week, the apartment next door, which was effectively the same size, just got rented for $575 a week, and that didn't have those additions that I've just talked about. So I think I'm going to market mine for about $600 a week, probably get $590 or thereabouts. Be happy with that, and it'll probably be a rolling 12-month lease. So you can see there's a 50% uplift in the cash flow, and also there might be a 50% uplift in value. If it's not 50 or 40 or 30, whatever, it still has an uplift in market value, and I have complete control over the property. It's not tied up, you know, with a 20-year lease, for example. So that's a good example of where having a serviced apartment makes sense when you buy something and the alternative use is actually a lot higher. So in that instance, I would recommend someone buy a serviced apartment. Now, are they good or bad? Well, for capital growth purposes, they're not great. And the property hasn't grown much in value over the last 20 years compared to other investments that I've made, residential, retail, industrial, etc. So it's not a great investment for capital growth purposes, but it is good for cash flow. So if you look at the cash flow that I had originally when I bought it, which was around $11,000, it's now going to be close to $30,000. So you can see there's probably a 3 times uplift in cash flow. So in terms of buying something for cash flow, it's great, but it's not a great investment for leveraging purposes because the banks won't take it as an acceptable security. They'll apply a zero market value. So if you want to buy something where you can leverage debt and to build a portfolio, it's not a great investment. But if you want to pay cash for something, it is good. It gives you good cash flow, and you can increase that cash flow so long as you're buying it, knowing that the alternative use will be a higher value use, as I've explained. So there you go. Hopefully that gives you some insight into what service apartments are. It's important to know what they are. They're just commercial properties, no different to you buying a retail property with a lease. It's just a commercial property. The downside is there's not good capital growth. Capital growth is not really good, and unfortunately, these leases, the operators that tie up these leases, they're usually for long periods. So you've got to be careful you're not tied up with a lease for a long period, because that means by not being able to take back the lease, you can't then add value to the property. So these are things to consider moving forward. Hopefully you found this information valuable. It's sensitive. So this is the main room. So you've got the kitchenette there, fridge, washing machine, electric hot plate. Got a little bit of rubbish because we've been doing some renovations. Reverse cycle heating. All comes fully serviced with lounge, desk, telephone, TV, and it opens up into a bedroom. Bathroom. One of the issues was this particular room had no built-in robes, and what we did is spent some money putting in a built-in robe. It's only 400ml as opposed to 600, so we wanted to save on space but give tenants the opportunity to have more storage area here for their clothing. Also, the property wasn't self-contained from the point of view of having a laundry, so what we did is we took this particular area here, which was just a built-in robe with an electricity box up here, and we've installed a reverse cycle washing machine dryer. So now tenants don't actually have to leave the apartment. They can wash and dry their clothing here. Also, what we had to do was stop the water supply for the whole building to install a stopper. So we've put a stopper there under the bench, and now we can actually control the water flow here and change washers and do whatever we have to do without causing problems to any of the other buildings. Got good natural light, so it's a nice space for any tenant. 3 rooms. The one next door just got rented for $575, and that didn't include a built-in robe or a washing machine dryer. So I think we're going to market this one for $590 and try and get $590 on a 12 or 24 month lease. That seems to be appropriate. And you can see here the ceilings are quite high too, so lots of space.